Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual food panel and cooking class demonstration with Times Free Press food and entertainment writer Barry Corder and chefs Charlie Loomis and Mia Littlejohn. I'm incredibly excited for this event. It's new and different than we've done before, and I think you'll all find it really interesting. The first half will be the panel, and the second half, the last 30 minutes, will be the cooking demonstration with Charlie. My name is Allison Collins, and I'm the digital engagement editor here at the Times Free Press. I'm just here to help moderate questions today. So if you're watching, whether it's during the panel discussion or the cooking demonstration at the end, please type any questions you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and I will try and ask them if time allows. Sometimes we run out of time, but I try and get to as many questions as possible. One other thing I just wanted to let y'all know about before we get started is if you haven't yet, the Times Free Press runs a Facebook group all about food news and has a lot of Barry stories on there. Unfortunately, we started the Facebook group shortly before quarantine started, so we haven't done a lot with it yet, but since everything's starting to reopen slowly, we're kind of trying to ramp it back up. So if you haven't yet, please go like that Facebook group. It's facebook.com/groups/chat-eats, and the Facebook group is called Chattanooga Eats. You can also follow us on Instagram. We put a lot of food and lifestyle news on there, and you can either follow us at Chattanooga is our handle, or you can just open your Instagram app and open your camera and hover it over the image on the screen, and it should capture it, and you can follow us. That's all I really have. So if you'd like, grab a beverage of your choice for the next 30 minutes as we listen to Barry and Charlie and Mia, and then we will get cooking the last 30 minutes. Barry, I will kick it off to you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Allison. Hey, everyone. This is something very different. This is going to be a lot of fun. As Allison said, we've got chefs Charlie Loomis and Mia Littlejohn who bring somewhat different perspectives to what's going on in the restaurant food service industry right now. We've got sort of a structured hour. It's going to go pretty quick. It's going to be pretty loose. So if you have questions, please let us know. We'll try to get them answered. Charlie has obviously a story with the Bobby Flay, and Mia is very involved in all kinds of different aspects of the restaurant industry in town. So we thought this would be a really good place to start. Hopefully this goes very well and we can do a couple of them. But just real quick to give you a little bit of perspective, in 2018, according to some labor statistics, there were almost more than 2,400 people in the food service industry in Chattanooga. That's more than 4,000 waiters, waitresses, 7,600 food prep and serving people, 2,100 restaurant cooks, 980 short order cooks, 830 fast food cooks, 670 dishwashers. I say that not to bog you down with numbers. I just think it's important because it's not just about going out and having a good time and getting something to eat. These things, restaurants, food service, they pay people's mortgages and their bills and tuition, all that stuff. And kind of go off script a little bit. If you see right behind me right there, there's a couple of cookbooks. It's actually 2 cookbooks. And when I saw them today, it made me remember this story. Back in 1986, I was working at the Gazebo, and a woman named Helen Exum came in. Helen wrote both of those books, and they're probably 2 of the best-selling cookbooks to come out of Chattanooga. She was the editor, one of the editors at the News Free Press. I was a waiter at the Gazebo. They used to serve these giant Bloody Marys, big tulip glasses, 2 for $1 at lunch. I was the waiter. She came in with 3 of her friends.
Barry, where was that restaurant? Do you mind telling us?
Yeah, the Gazebo on George Avenue is next to the Brash Register. They had the same owners. They shared kitchens. It was one of the nicer restaurants in town. So here's Helen in her linen shirt, her 3 friends. I'm waiting on them. Got a big tray full of 8 tulip Bloody Marys. You know what happened. I dumped them, all of them, all 8, all over those 4 ladies. Classic. And so they were all very, very nice. And it was at that very moment that I realized every human being should have to be in food service and wait tables at some point, because you learn a lot. A year later, I'm about to graduate from college, and Bob Nichols, who was a photographer at the Times Free Press, comes into where I was working at the time and said, there's a job opening. do you want to interview with Helen Exum? So you can imagine I was more than a little bit nervous about how that interview was going to go, but she didn't remember, never said a word. So
at least you had a good icebreaker.
yeah. I kept it quiet. I didn't say a word, but yeah, that could have gone badly. So here I am, 33 years later. I got the job, obviously, but
Did you ever tell her that that was you?
I haven't told many people, but you guys right now. No, I never said a word. But you know, we all have those stories, right? I don't know that we all go to work at a paper with a woman you dump Bloody Marys all over, but anyway, it reminded me of that today. Charlie, the reason we wanted to go with Charlie and Mia, and I'm gonna let them tell their stories. I'll stop talking here in a minute. But back in January, obviously Charlie beat Bobby Flay on his own turf with one of his own dishes that he's very well known for. We're going to talk about that. Mia, you're a chef yourself. You're a principal owner of Proof, which is I'm going to let you describe it. You guys do all kinds of things within the food industry, and we're going to get into that. And out of that, we're going to talk about sort of where we are in the food service industry right now, in particular in Chattanooga. Charlie, I think, has a fascinating sort of twist. You guys are going to be surprised. Mia's got a couple of funny stories that I might have to prod her to tell, but they've managed to take something that is not a very often talked about household item and repurpose it into something more useful and not more useful. I don't know how I want to say that. I'm going to let you deal with that. Something with a different purpose in especially today's environment. So we're going to do that. And then, as Allison said, Charlie is going to show us how to make a dish that he and I talked about a month ago for another story, sort of a pantry find. What's in you? What can you go grab out of your pantry and make? And I just love the angle on this. As you said, it's stuff that you've already bought, so we know you like it. And you told me yesterday, you're so confident people are going to like it, you're going to challenge them to make something they don't like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and obviously, I also want to say the Bobby Flay thing we're going to talk about. There's going to be time during the cooking, so we might not get into that in this first part, because I really want to sort of focus on where we are in the restaurant industry. So 2 parts to the show. And Mia, let's start with you. You have your Proof is an educational sort of business. Plus you have a restaurant element. You got all kinds of different elements, right? So let you tell us what it is you guys do.
Yeah, so Proof is really a food and beverage resource center. Housed within that center, we have educational space, we have a restaurant residency program, we have a shared commercial commissary kitchen where we produce consumer packaged food and beverage products, everything from cocktail syrups to CBD tinctures and dog treats to smoked sausages for one of our chefs who's opening a po' boy concept. So we have a couple different aspects in terms of what the space allows us to do. And then we have a patio and a cocktail bar as well. We're located actually right downtown in what used to be the 2 Cents Kitchen space at 422 East MLK. It's a beautiful old building. It has one of those barrel ceilings that was really designed for acoustics. And we had been working since last fall to kind of transform the space and get it ready for being activated. We had already several clients that were working in the kitchen. We knew that Little Oso was going to be our first restaurant in residence in the program. And we were all teed up and scheduled to have our grand opening on March 13th. And now we like to joke that instead we had our grand closing. And basically we got back to work on Monday and just realized that instead of opening a bar and restaurant with a restaurant residency program and the commercial kitchen commissary side, we were going to really zero in on and focus on the things that had been a little bit further down in our business plan in terms of developing coursework for restaurants and helping hold their hand through the startup process. But then also in this particular moment, we realized there was about to be a lot of information and a lot of stuff that was going to fall on restaurants. We also considered like the sort of mandatory shutdown as a unique opportunity for restaurant owners and food and beverage professionals. Charlie's a great example of this, whether it's not an individual or like a bigger, larger basis. It's kind of provided this opportunity for people to reconsider where their priorities are and what they want to be spending their time doing. And so we started developing then in the middle of March coursework for individuals and for companies. And then also just kind of some best practices and protocols in the midst of a pandemic. So that's a little bit about what we do. And I think maybe, we did a lot of random stuff before I hand it over to Charlie, because I really do want to hear about what he's been up to and how all of everything that's been going on with the pandemic affected him. One of the stories that Barry was mentioning, after the tornadoes in Chattanooga, you guys might remember there'd been kind of a local run on toilet paper and hand sanitizer in April. And then when the tornadoes happened, there was really a demand for the people that were fixing the tornado, kind of the first responders, the people repairing the power grid. They needed hand sanitizer for all of the EPB linemen. And we just happened to, Mike and I, my business partner, Michael Robinson, have a background in distilling through Chattanooga whiskey, and we have relationships with Gate 11 and Last Lions and some of the other local distillers. So we ended up trying to figure out a way to make locally sourced hand sanitizer, which you really just need like the gelling agent and the aloe and the denatured alcohol. What we also needed was a bottle. And when we started asking around, everybody was like, yeah, we can't get you 20,000 bottles. And then one day we were like, well, what about those bottles? And so we ended up with a discontinued KY jelly bottle. And it's perfect. Fits in the palm of your hand really nicely. So that's what we did. We had 20,000 bottles. We used 15 of them for tornado relief. And then we have been handing them out to guests and other initiatives. We passed them out to the protesters over the last 3 weeks. So it's been great to have some extra hand sanitizer around. But yeah, it's just right now it's all about like flexibility. I think it's also about taking care of ourselves and others. And that's really what we've been leaning into here at Proof.
Yeah, obviously
awesome.
I'm smiling about that, but it's that repurposing, that pivoting is the word now everybody's using. And I want to come back to that in a minute, but let's bring everybody up to speed on what's going on in Charlie's life. Cause Charlie, it looks like you're in Chattanooga, but you're not. Like I said, January, top of the TV world anyway, beating Bobby Flay, and the COVID pandemic comes along and changed everything for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because my story isn't that different than most people in the hospitality industry, and pretty much all good restaurant operators and owners, furloughed their employees. They laid them off so that they'd have the ability to get unemployment, and so pretty much everybody got laid off. And you really have to kind of evaluate what your next steps are, and just like Mia said, you got to also kind of evaluate what's important. And so I kind of went back and forth, and it was really difficult for me to kind of figure out what the next steps were. But I've got both of my parents are at the at risk age. I've got a lot of family up in Leesburg, Virginia, and so I had to make the difficult decision to leave Chattanooga and move back up here and make sure to take care of what's important, be around family, and it was very difficult, but something that I had to do.
Yeah, that's what I think it's important. You're not alone by any stretch, and that's part of why I mentioned all those numbers. You know, early on, the people in the food industry. It's just the reality of where we are. And Mia, you mentioned I've done several stories for the paper on restaurants and how they're handling this. And honestly, the guys over at the Flying Squirrel said something that really stuck with me. They shut down for a while, have reopened, and they basically view it as this is their third restaurant. You know, they had a small version and then the Flying Squirrel, and then that shut down. So for them, it's they're looking at it as a brand new endeavor. They took the time off to fall back, take a hard look at everything from, you know, how they prepare something to menus to how they handle their business model. And Mia, that's one of the things I really wanted to ask you about, because you talk to so many people in the industry, yourselves included, you and Mike. Is that normal? Is that what a lot of people are doing?
I think that that's what people who will survive are going to be forced to do. I think right now there isn't kind of any return to normalcy in the food and beverage world. What I hear when I talk to restaurants from across our city, around our state, across the country, and around the world is that we are recreating what we used to do, and it's looking differently today for our guests, for our staff. There's a ton of updated protocols in terms of mitigating the risk. There's also the added issue of guest confidence. Then there's also just sort of following the current public health kind of data and figuring out how does that play into what your customers are going to want. You know, it's affected the industry in different waves. Initially, I think I mentioned we had done some food boxes by repurposing, you know, some of that bulk stuff that normally would go, a 50-pound bag of pasta would normally go to a restaurant. And because we have a food manufacturing facility, we're able to package that up to send out to families who might be experiencing food scarcity because of what Charlie just described, which is that abrupt furloughing that most people experience. For us, because we didn't have payroll back in January, and we had just hired our team at the beginning of March, we couldn't expect that they would get unemployment if we furloughed them. So we actually decided to try and keep them employed, and we were able to do that during the pandemic to give them the hours that we had originally committed to giving them. And we did that just through being available. There were not a lot of people available to do and meet certain needs around the community. And so we kept people employed. When we did the hand sanitizer project, we even were able to hire a couple of other out-of-work folks from other restaurants locally. But yeah, I mean, what you're seeing is that everybody is kind of back to square one in a certain sense in terms of what their operations are going to look like, and then also what their guests are going to want. So we're looking at a lot more meals that can go easily into the freezer, or meals that can go easily directly into the oven, so they don't feel unsafe about that, you know, the packaging and that kind of stuff. And, you know, just things that travel well are going to be more important. Our distributors have switched to a lot more frozen proteins instead of fresh proteins, just to mitigate the risk of losing product if there is another wave of shutdowns. So it's just layers and layers of that, from the farmers to, you know, who are seeing that they are having trouble getting the labor to pick their crops as they become available. Or last week, you know, the hog kind of farmers who the pork producers were asking for a special stipulation from the EPA so that they could keep more hogs than they're normally allowed to on their farms, because the pork processing plants are shut down. So rather than slaughter the animals, they were looking for special exception in terms of the crowding that they could have on their farms. And obviously none of those things are things we could have anticipated. So the best encouragement I can give for anyone in the food and beverage world is to hold it all loosely, because we're never sure what's going to happen the next day.
Yeah. I want to point out, these are just two stories. You know, I hope we do this some more with some other people, but they are indicative, right? I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, Mia. You mentioned to me the other day that you guys were being pretty hardline, if that's the right word, on some of the guidelines. And again, I'm speaking for you, but you kind of laughed and said, "Oh, it's not working for us. You know, we're not making money.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know."
Well, we haven't figured out the business model yet. I do think the guidelines are working well, because what we end up experiencing is that our customers are excited that we're taking those precautions. And it also, you know, just from an operator's standpoint, you really don't want people at your establishment who aren't willing to help you protect your staff. So if you can't, so it's nice to set that up like straight at the door. And if people aren't into it, then that's okay with me.
Right. Charlie, so, you know, you're back home in Virginia with your family, your parents, you know, I'm sure you're busy. You're doing some of these online things as a venture for yourself, similar to what you're going to be doing for us just here in a couple of minutes. But what else? I mean, what's the world like? Are you sending out resumes? Are you do you need to stay in Virginia? I mean,
Well, just
and I'm asking because I'm sure you're not alone. Again, you know,
Yeah.
like Mia was saying, what do you do if this is your job?
Well, just like Mia said, I mean, it's about adaptability and agility right now. It's about making sure that you're, you know, kind of staying on your toes and knowing that this could change at any given moment. So yes, I definitely had to polish up my resume because I haven't handed one out in 15 years. And, you know, so I had that done. And then the ad hoc supper club, I started that because, you know, I think that this could have been something that could have been used before the pandemic. It's basically what I'm doing is a virtual cocktail party and cooking class. I think people really need to start, you know, when this first hit, everybody bought all the rice and dried beans that were out there. And then I don't think anybody knew how to cook any of these things. You know, they're so used to depending on different platforms, restaurants, you know, frozen items, takeaways and stuff like that. And, you know, all of a sudden they're at home, they've got this stuff and they need, you know, they at least want to feel confident that, you know, if they're not able to get out of their house for a little while, that they can cook a meal with their family and feel good about that. And so what I was trying to do is connect families from around the globe, bring some sort of normalcy to their life to where they can, you know, cook a meal. If, you know, you live in Tennessee and your parents live in Virginia, you can, you know, virtually cook a meal with them. I send a recipe out a few days ahead of time and they can have the groceries delivered to their house. And we usually start with a cocktail or a mocktail to kind of lighten things up. And then we'll do an appetizer and an entree. And for the most part, I keep it simple, but it's more about having fun and connecting with friends and family than, you know, than just being you know, a party or a cooking class. I want it to be kind of a little bit of both. But I mean, I think a lot of what we're seeing in Virginia is exactly what y'all are describing in Tennessee. And that, you know, on one side, it's very costly to close down a restaurant. You know, you know, so people are really depending on, these guidelines to be sent out and be very, you know, they're looking for some really good direction. And I think what Mia's doing with Proof is fantastic. And I mean, I know that it was maybe a different idea to begin with, but I think that a lot of people are going to be looking for some guidance from you all, because this is that's a fantastic way to kind of maybe have a good solid message to go out to people, because there's too many people that are getting their information from all different sources. And if there's just one source saying, all right, here's how people can run a restaurant from now on safely, here's how you can make sure that your guests trust you. And I think that that's all that the restaurateurs and restaurant workers want, is to feel safe and to make sure that their guests are safe, and to make sure that feeling of safety is going to their guests as well, so that, you know, we can get back to, you know, I don't know what normal is going to look like in the future, but I know that restaurants are going to be a very important part of it. So it's the sooner we can get some guidelines put together and get kind of a standardized way of safely operating, I think the better.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think what Mia said earlier about there's so many layers to this is what's fascinated me since this all started. You know, we think bartenders, chefs, owners are out of work, but it's the farmers, it's the guys who do clean the napkins and bring the mats and deliver the produce, drive the trucks. I mean, it's so many layers, and we all eat. And I don't think a lot of us, you know, I'm fortunate I eat at home a lot. There's a lot of people who don't ever, you know, our former coworker laughed that her stove was where she kept her books. You know, she just, she just never used it.
Very,
So,
you know, towards that, I mean, one thing I took hope sort of, or kept telling people early on when I was talking to a lot of folks who were feeling pretty depressed about the state of like the industry, the food and beverage industry. One of the things that I like to say to people, especially at the beginning, is like, we're not in a famine. We're just, all of our systems are failing right now. We have to figure out new systems for connecting with people, and also for food delivery, and like whether that's grocery or cooking classes like Charlie's doing, or better takeout options. I think we're just in a stage where we're like rapidly prototyping how to solve this problem, and it's going to look different at different seasons and in different places, and we can learn from each other. And that's been part of the really exciting thing, is just that opportunity to share learning and to like do it together, because it's really, it is an uncomfortable place to be, to have suddenly everything that you've put so much work into kind of tossed to the wind.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because it's almost like that show Shark Tank. You know, anytime I watch that show, I see someone come out with something, I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? You know, why couldn't I have thought of that? Well, now's the time to think of things, because everything's changing, and so we all need to put some new ideas out there and implement them quickly. And you know, it's a very easy time for people that are leading the industry to kind of help it along, and you have the ability to help a lot of people right now.
all right. Well, I think we're about ready to get into the cooking portion of our show. I wanted to say before we do, Mia, proof, the incubator part of it, I think is fascinating. And so if people are listening and you're thinking of starting a restaurant or any sort of food business, that's kind of what you guys can do, is sort of stop them from having to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? You can share the process
Yeah, we can take you from concept to launch in about 12 weeks. So if you become part of our programming, or even if you don't want to move into our space, we can still find ways to work together and support you on your journey. Whether you're taking an artisan food concept, you know, food idea from concept to marketplace, or you're launching and starting your own restaurant or food truck. Next Friday, we're going to actually be having a big Juneteenth event, and we'll have 3 new concepts that we're launching out of our kitchen. So stay tuned for details, because we have not announced them yet.
Nice. All right. We heard it here first. All right, Charlie. So you're going to start cooking for us, and I'm going to give
before Charlie starts cooking, I do have one question that I want to ask. So we did briefly talk about how restaurants have had to really adapt, and we've started things like, Charlie, your virtual cooking classes. And quite frankly, I'm a huge fan of these virtual happy hours. So kind of how do you think even if you went back to work at a restaurant, do you think you would continue those cooking classes? Or do you think when things start to get back to normal, we're going to still see those virtual food events?
I'm going to continue doing them as long as people want to see them. It's honestly a lot of fun for me. You know, as much as I am absolutely in love with the restaurant industry and will never fully leave it, this is kind of like taking all the fun aspects of being a chef, you know, interacting with guests, teaching, and cooking, of course. And, you know, it leaves kind of some of the longer hours and some of the stress on the side for, you know, that way I can kind of split my time and do a little bit of both. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me, and they're very interactive, and yeah, it's been great. I'm definitely going to continue them.
Good, that's good to hear. Okay, well, I'll turn it over to you all. And then just a reminder, again, if you have questions as he's cooking, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A box and I'll ask them for you. Okay?
Perfect.
Awesome, Charlie. I'm going to turn it over. I love this idea. Again, this sort of came out of a conversation a story that I did on how to, you know, we're all at home. Go take what's in your pantry and make something delicious out of it. Mm-hmm. And this boils it down to the basics, and I just love the idea. So what are you going to make?
So we call this a pantry pickup in my house. So what we do is I like to kind of figure out what I have on hand and what to use. So in the restaurant industry, one of the most important things that you do is manage your inventory. If you have something that's maybe getting a little bit longer on its life, then you need to make sure to use it quick. And in this specific recipe, it's kind of a play on a traditional pasta salad. However, you can use any type of pasta, any type of protein, any type of vegetable. If you want to have cheese in there, use any type of cheese. If you have herbs growing in your garden, use any type of herbs. If you have a bottle of salad dressing, use any type of salad dressing. And for the most part, if you have it in your fridge, then you probably eat it. Or if it's a leftover item, if you have a couple pieces of salmon left over, then you probably like salmon. Or if you have a half rotisserie chicken, then you might be a single person, because I will knock out an entire rotisserie chicken on my own. But who knows? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring a pot of water up to boil. So if you look over here at the stove, we're going to do. I'm actually going to be doing a half batch of what everyone else is doing, just because I know that I won't eat it all. I can save some of it for later. So I'm going to do a half bag of pasta. I'm actually doing a gluten-free pasta. Like I said, you can do any type of pasta. You can do linguine, you can do fusilli. It's completely up to you. So one of the things that I'm really excited about and passionate about is food waste. And so I make sure that every time I make something, I try to use the entire thing. And so I'll always have a half cucumber sitting around, or I'll have some leftover parsley or a tomato or whatever it is. Broccoli, I absolutely love broccoli, but a lot of people will just cut the florets off and throw the rest of it away. And I really like the entire thing. And it's if you cut, I don't know if you can see this or not, but if you cut the broccoli like so, you kind of just drag your knife down along the end like that, then it's a way that you can use the entire thing. It also kind of gives you a nice little handle. One of my favorite recipes actually is charred broccoli. I did not like broccoli as a kid, because the only way that I ever had it was raw and dipping it in salad dressing, and I just felt like my jaw got tired, and it was kind of boring to me. Unless you're dipping it in ranch. I mean, I think, for me personally, I think everything's better with ranch.
Hey, can we get the camera on his knife cutting skills as well? Mark operating the camera. And then Charlie, we also have a question. Are you going to be doing any classes on knife cutting skills, or shaking the pan and sauteing, or any special techniques?
Absolutely. I've done several of those, and that's one of the most important things. So what first off, it's important to get yourself a good set of knives. Just do it. It's I grew up with horrible knives for half of my childhood, and then my parents finally splurged and got a set of Henkel knives, German steel, and they were it was a game changer. And so I think knife skills and also maintaining your knives is a very important thing to know. So I do classes on that. I do classes on technique, a lot of stuff. So I don't know. I try to keep it fun no matter what kind of class we do. But yeah. So what I did is I cut the broccoli down lengthwise so that the stem is still attached to it, and then I trim the stem back just a little bit. I don't know if you can see this or not because of the angle, but so the stem will be in kind of little, smaller pieces here. I'm cutting it on a hard bias, so diagonally. And then you basically just want to get the florets into kind of little bite-sized pieces. And then the stems we're going to cut down. Whenever I do a pasta salad, and it's completely how you want to do it, I like there to be almost half stuff and half pasta. I don't eat a ton of pasta, and if I do, I want real pasta, and I want a lot of it. But
Charlie, can I kind of add on, because I want to reiterate what you said earlier. I love broccoli, but not everybody does. And the point of what you said earlier, I mean, you said it, but if somebody has these things in their refrigerator, we can assume they like it, right? That's the point of this dish. You already bought it, you know, whether it's the rotisserie chicken or whatever cheese or dressing or whatever your vegetables. So
Exactly right.
Doesn't have to be broccoli. It can be whatever you already know you like. I think that's so key to this dish.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if everybody thinks the same way that I do, but I absolutely love when my refrigerator and my pantry kind of empty out, and then I can replenish it. I don't like having all these little half-empty things in there. I don't like it being full. I'd show you my fridge, but it's then I'd have to remove my camera. But I like to empty it out and then refill it. It's inventory management.
Yeah.
All right, so after all your broccoli is cut down, I'm going to kind of set that aside. And like Barry was just touching on, like, if you like carrots, use your carrots. You know, you can do carrots, tomatoes, ranch, and cheddar for one pasta salad if you want to. You could do a light balsamic dressing with, you know, goat cheese and spinach. Whatever you have, that's what you're going to use. So I'll throw some cucumbers in here. I'm just doing little half moons with this.
Charlie, we've allotted about a half hour for this. Is that normally what it might take you to make this dish?
Honestly, I think you can probably do it a lot faster. It's something where it's a great dish that you can kind of either have as a side without the protein, and then have the you know, some barbecue chicken on the side. If you do add a protein, then you could you know, you could have it as a lunch for several days. You make the pasta salad, make a bunch of chicken, then tear the chicken up, the leftovers, and add it to it for your lunches. Let's see.
And again, you're using, you know, it could be spaghetti pie. It's whatever pasta you have in the house.
Exactly. So when you have tomatoes that look like this and they're kind of splitting and they need to get used, I make sure that gets used before anything else. And the funny thing is that you can actually use any grain also. You could always switch this out with rice and do a hot dish. You know, it's all about recipes or guidelines. You got to figure out what you like and then make it your own. All right, so right now, what do we have? We have broccoli, cucumbers, tomatoes. We'll go ahead and let's see, I've got some, I'd say fresh basil, but it's kind of on its last leg as well, so we're going to throw that in there.
They call that wilted basil.
Yeah. This is lightly wilted basil.
Let me ask both of you. My wife likes to cook. She loves to cook, but we joke she's never made the same dish twice. Charlie, I assume, and both of you guys are restaurant people, so you kind of have to be consistent. But when you're at home, I mean, she's constantly adapting, just like you, Charlie. It's whatever's in the fridge. That's the challenge. But if I ask her to go make the same thing she made last night, she couldn't do it. Is that how it is with you guys?
So for me personally, I grew up with two parents that cooked. My mother is by the book in everything she does. She follows the recipe to the T. And my dad is the exact opposite. He's creative. Every time he makes it completely different. And so being a chef, it's very important to have both sides of that, having both the creative side and the discipline side. You know, there's nothing worse than when you go to a restaurant and a dish tastes different than what you really, really wanted and came in for. So it's, you know, I think it's important to have both sides.
How about you, Mia?
I mean, I would say I'm a pretty improvisational cook when I'm cooking for my family at home. But like Charlie said, you know, when you have the public's expectation, you really want that consistency just so people know what to expect, especially like in terms of how spicy something might be. So I've also done a lot of technical recipe writing over the years. And so that is all about like making sure you're not inconsistent. And so that when you write a recipe so that someone could follow it to the T and recreate it as you did at home. But like Charlie said, I mean, in general, recipes are really just like a jumping off point.
Right.
You can change any element of it to your taste. But hopefully if you've gone to eat something that Charlie made, for instance, the dish he beat Bobby Flay with, which maybe we could get back to talking about that. But you know, if I had a recipe written for that, I would want to make sure that it tasted consistent with what he had made.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, it won, so I want to make that dish. I don't want my own version of it. So, good point. Also, tell us about that, Charlie. That's, I mean, for people who don't know, Bobby does this. This is what he does. It's one of his shows. I think you told us he does what, 3 a day or 5 a day, 3 days a week or something. So
three shows a day, 5 days a week is what he said, and that to me kind of blew my mind because it was. I think that maybe intimidated me a little bit. That's a very competitive person. That's all he does in his life is competes in competitive cooking. You know, and that's you know, I came to do that show just because it was you know, he's kind of the best at competitive food cooking, and B, he had that show Bobby Flay Throwdown where he'd go to other people's towns and beat them in their own town with their favorite dish, and then he'd like, all right, I'm Bobby Flay and I'm out of here, and it was kind of like embarrassing, and so I wanted to do that in his house, and you know, to be honest, the thought never actually crossed my mind to actually beat him. I just was like, all right, don't make an ugly plate of food, don't lose in the first round, and you know, just make pretty food. That's it. And so after I won the first round, I was like, all right, I'm all in now. What's that, Mia?
I said it must have tasted pretty good too, if you know, in the end.
Oh yeah. It was pretty fantastic. It made the plane ride home a lot of fun.
It was. Tell everybody what the dish was.
So I did a variation on Eggs Benedict. I actually did shrimp toast, which is kind of a traditional Chinese food recipe that you get in you know, most Americanized Chinese restaurants. It's a puree of shrimp with egg whites and ginger, and they spread that on toast, and then typically they deep fry it. I seared it on a large cast iron pan, and I used that as my English muffin. And after that, I did a tomato jam. It was kind of sweet and spicy, and it had a great umami flavor to it. It was you know, a little bit sour, but it really balanced everything out and brought that little bit of heat that it needed. And then I did poached eggs, which I don't know if anyone has had to poach 8 eggs at a time. I mean, we've done it a ton of times in the restaurants, but when you're doing this on live TV in someone else's kitchen and it's dependent on, you know, you could either win or lose horribly and be embarrassed. It was that was kind of frightening. And then I did a roasted green chili hollandaise and some crispy country ham. So I kind of wanted to bring it back around Southern, which is my traditional style of cooking, and obviously it did pretty well. And I got a unanimous decision by the judges, which was awesome, and I think it humbled him a little bit.
Well, you told me afterwards that you were going to go big, and that was big. So
yeah, it was kind of like if I'm gonna go up against the best, I want to do something in his wheelhouse. I wanted to do something that he was known for, and he's got you know, Brunch with Bobby cooking shows, and he's got, I think, 2 brunch or breakfast shows, and then he's got brunch cookbooks, and that's supposedly one of his favorite dishes. So beating him with that was a good I don't know. That was kind of like all I wanted was to beat him at something that he was really good at.
On top of the world. So we do have a question. Mary wants to know if you'll ever teach us how to make that Eggs Benedict.
Absolutely. I've actually done a few Eggs Benedict shows. I didn't do a class on the exact one that I did for Bobby Flay. I'm happy to, but it would probably take just a little bit longer than than a normal class. But I did an Eggs Benedict class last Sunday. It was a lot of fun because I was able to do, typically if you're doing a brunch cooking class and it's one of these virtual cocktail parties, then you kind of have to set your day aside and make sure that we set the tone for the day. Because we started out with some delicious mimosas, and then we did the Eggs Benedict, and I think everybody was successful. Nobody broke their sauce, and it was a lot of fun.
Very cool. How's the dish coming?
Fantastic. So my pasta is cooked, and I rinsed it off to cool it down and stop it from cooking. For anyone that's cooked with brown rice pasta before, it's kind of temperamental and it's easy to just absolutely destroy. And so, like I said before, my goal is to do about half pasta and half vegetables. I've also got some cooked chicken here. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I had leftover rotisserie chicken. I made a rotisserie chicken for this, but so I'm going to add our chicken in here. I'm actually going to go ahead and toss the dressing with this before I add the veggies. I'm also going to add a few sun-dried tomatoes. I kind of like that little flavor pop there. I happen to have Wishbone Italian, which is a guilty pleasure of mine.
Love it. Now we all know, Charlie.
Yeah, exactly. I know. When I serve a little metal container of salad dressing to you at a dinner in my home, and I tell you that I made it myself, and you can call me a liar.
The secret sauce.
Exactly. And so I think in the recipe I said every dressing is different. So what I recommend is adding a little bit, stir it up, taste it, and you kind of want to do that with most recipes anyway. But I probably have about 3/4 of a cup here. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt and some fresh ground pepper, and then I am going to give this a stir.
We had another question, Charlie, and it was somebody is having a hard time finding a tasty gluten-free pasta. Do you have any that you recommend or know of?
I got this one from Trader Joe's, and I really like it, but Chattanooga needs to get Trader Joe's there first.
Don't bring up the source.
I know. Well, my sister actually, she was one of their corporate artists, and would travel and do those cool murals that they have on the walls there. And so I'm naturally a fan. So I've got this brown rice pasta fusilli. The key is, like I said, just do not overcook it. It can be fantastic if you cook it properly. You can see it's still holding on. You might even want to slightly undercook it, and then when you set it in the fridge with the dressing, it's gonna help kind of break it down a little bit.
Charlie, you also mentioned that you could do some other gluten-free things besides just a gluten-free pasta, like rice or quinoa or something like that.
Absolutely. So this dish specifically, if you do, if you did quinoa and you add the dressing to that, toss that, keep it cold, and then maybe toss your veggies separately and just kind of do that right on top of it. That's also a great meal prep. I've got these nice little to-go containers that I found that have separate compartments, and so you can kind of add all the components there. And that's one of the things I think people are going to be focusing on a lot here soon, is working off their COVID bods, as I call it. It's not easy to sit at home, and I kept seeing all these little jokes about people eating all their snacks first, and then I found that it wasn't really a joke. It's all my snacks went first, and then I'm left with veggies and pasta and rice and beans. All right, so I've got that there, and then I've got feta today. Literally any cheese that you have, it's all good.
Yeah, to break it down, this could be whatever the dressing you had. It could be sandwich slices for the cheese, right? That's the whole.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this, and
You could do you can almost do like a traditional chef salad where you chop up all your some salami, chop up some provolone, some tomatoes, and it's great. It's whatever you have. We call it a pantry pickup in the house. So that's that. So
back to your point about the people eating all the snacks. I have a 2-year-old, and one day I came home and my husband was working in a different room, kind of trying to keep the kids out. And she had drunk a whole bottle of maple syrup. So it's not just those of us who.
Like, just so you know, that was $18.
I know. Well, now in our house, like when things feel a little crazy, we just say, just don't drink the syrup.
It's something she obviously had to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I challenge anybody to try to figure out a version of this that doesn't taste good. If you're making it with stuff that you normally eat at your house, I just don't see how you can do it. The other thing is I'll actually use a little bit of the same dressing, and I'll toss some arugula. I'll put that down first, and then I'll put the pasta salad right on top of that, and it's pretty fantastic.
You know, we're talking about this as the what's in the pantry type of thing, but the markets have opened, so there's all kinds of fresh produce out there. So it can be fresh and delicious, and all that as well. I'm looking at that thinking the tomatoes that we bought the last 2 weeks at the market were pretty amazing. So might have to rethink some of this. So
absolutely. Well, we've done it where we have black beans in there and the chicken, the dressing, then we're doing tortilla chips on top. You got to get inventive and try your best to mess it up and let me know if you succeed.
All right. So
I have another question here, and I'm going to pretend somebody asked this, but it's my question. What has been kind of your go-to meal to make in quarantine? Or do you have that, or as kind of Barry was talking about, is it different every night, or kind of what is your go-to?
Let's see. My go-to, I eat a lot of fish, and I eat a lot of quinoa. So I'll do quinoa and salmon. Then I'll do a different vegetable every time. I also, right before this happened, I bought a vertical rotisserie, and I'm absolutely in love with this thing. So I'm doing shawarma. I did chicken thigh shawarma with fresh pita bread, and I made gyros. We're doing, I'm doing whole chickens and doing rotisserie chickens, obviously. It's got like a wing basket on it. It's got all types of stuff, and I almost enjoy sitting there watching that better than a TV. It's pretty fantastic. I just watch my food spin for a while. My dog sits next to me and stares at it with me. It's a good dog human bonding.
Have
make sure he gets a little snack.
Have you guys found that with this time you're using it to sort of educate, maybe that's try new things, or you find you're you just said you're trying with the cooker, but are you slipping sort of same thing daily?
No, I'm constantly trying new things. You can't see it, but I've got an entire library of cookbooks over there that I'm always delving into. I don't watch a lot of TV, and that's kind of my moment of solace, I guess, is kind of going through and just picking out old recipes and reinventing them and just trying new things. So I've found a lot of cool things that I hadn't done in the past, and it's pretty much different every day.
How about you, Mia?
I would say, well, for me at my house, to answer Allison's question, we make a lot of tacos. So that lets me kind of.
You're speaking my language, Mia.
Tacos are the perfect food.
I like food wrapped in food, whatever that looks like. So, but my kids, they don't like things quite as spicy as my husband and I do, but it lets me kind of customize everyone's everything. And then like the pantry pickup pasta, you can kind of throw anything into a taco and make it work if you have the right mix of flavors and textures and ingredients. So you can make sweet potato tacos or mushroom tacos or black bean tacos. You can almost do anything in a taco. And My grandmother grew up in Mexico. She was a really good cook and taught me a lot about how to put those flavors together. But we also do a lot of eggs. Eggs are so versatile and can like be a really quick kind of easy supper if you're just feeling like scrambled eggs and you want to, or you can make a sort of a Spanish style tortilla with potatoes and just cook that in your oven. Like that's kind of an easy ingredient that you can still get, and it'll hold in your fridge, but you can throw a lot of different things together with eggs. And then what was the last question, Barry, before I forget?
Are you experimenting a lot while you theoretically at home, but you have kids?
A little bit more free time than I do right now. My husband and I both own our own small businesses, and we have 2 children who are luckily happily running wild. But normally when I get home at the end of the day, I try to focus a little bit on them and make sure they're not completely neglected. So
sure, makes perfect sense. All right. Well, I think we're about done, right? Why don't you guys, Charlie, if people wanted to watch some of your episodes ongoing, and because you involve them, right? What you're doing for us is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Different. People can cook along with you. So tell people how they can find you, and then I'll ask you the same to do the same.
Yeah. So obviously you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Or if you get on adhocsupperclub.com, I've got a website for it now. Or you can email me at chefcharlieloomis@gmail.com. The classes are relatively reasonably priced. They're a lot of fun, very interactive. We have people of all different levels of cooking. And so whoever actually hosts the event, I kind of walk through with them, figure out what they want to do. If they want to debunk how to cook Nashville hot chicken, or if they want to do how do you do schnitzel? How do you do schnitzel? How do you do, whatever it is. We come up with what they want to do. If they want to have a cocktail beforehand, or if they want to pair it with wine throughout a meal, it's really it's very user friendly. Whatever people are looking for, we adapt to it. So
awesome.
Great. And just so you all know that this recording will be available on our website, but we'll also email you a recording afterward if you ever want to go back and look at some of his techniques as well. And I'm thinking that an Eggs Benedict Charlie Loomis edition is in the works in the future.
I'm in.
Again,
I'm in.
great.
Mia, how can people get you?
Just visit our website or follow us on social media. So our website is proofincubator.com, and we have a really comprehensive blog there with all the resources we've been putting out. You can sign up for our newsletter there, or follow us on Instagram or Facebook. We're pretty active on those channels as well. My email is mia@proofincubator.com if you want to reach out to me directly. And we look forward to keeping this kind of conversation going. Thanks for hosting, Barry.
Thank you, guys. Allison, anything else?
No, that's it for me. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful night.
Barry, Allison, good to see you. Mia, good to see you.
Charlie, thanks so much. Mia, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
We'll see y'all soon.